We've had some crazy news around BMNR and the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole. And over the past month, every single week, I've been recapping all of the news pieces that I see around BMNR and the Ethereum ecosystem adoption and grouping them into buckets and talking about them with an end of the week recap. This video, I have about 100 tabs that I want to share with you, and I really want to get under 25 minutes. It's going to be a big video, jam-packed with information. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, if you are a BMNR shareholder or are interested in the stock, drop a like to this video, follow the channel for more, and share this video out. I've grouped the categories this week as follows. I started off with technicals, and then I have a bucket for rotation. I talk about international news that we got around Ethereum. I talk about accumulation. We have some ETHZilla news. I talk about the ecosystem adoption, BMNR specifically, and macro. So let's start off, first of all, in the technical bucket. So, of course, some of you guys might be technical analysts and some might not care at all, but there are some positive patterns that are forming on Ethereum. So you see a bull flag here, which is a pretty conventional pattern forming on Ethereum where it basically back tested that previous resistance. And you could see a similar thing with BMNR here. With the last two times it went into this purple area, from a technical pattern perspective, you had a big institutional buying round and it just shot the stock up. And it does typically face some resistance here in the mid $60 range. So we've been seeing this steady stair step up from a technical perspective on BMNR. And of course, you have the Ethereum bull flag that is still in play. This played out in 2020, and we saw a big pump in Ethereum stock price. Of course, that was something like a 10x in Ethereum's price ever since that time, from $400 to about $4,000. And we're seeing something similar form a second time now from a technical perspective. We're seeing Ethereum has some decent bids here around $4,000 on Binance. This was a few days ago. If we're talking about upside, this user says Ethereum could face some resistance around the $4,300 zone. If bulls are able to reclaim that zone, expect another fast move to the upside. Again, we're just talking about technical patterns in this first section. We see the Bollinger Bands contract here. So you can see that the Bollinger Band is getting squeezed tighter and tighter. And of course, it can only squeeze so tight before it expands and we see an explosion upwards. And here's just another view of Ethereum on that technical pattern. So you saw the same pattern back in 2021 when Ethereum broke out. And in 2025, the same structure is in place. Of course, we had this back test, and we're going to see what Ethereum does from now. We also see the RSI has entered into oversold territory. The last time that this happened, Ethereum pumped 250% in just 5 months. So that's a whole bunch of technical indicators for you that some of you might care about, some of you might not. Let's move on now to rotation. So Crypto Rover posted this around gold and Bitcoin, and basically saying that there is somewhat of a rotation happening between gold and Bitcoin. This is a better representation. So we saw gold reach those all-time highs and then just give up a lot of those gains. And we've been seeing Bitcoin has been catching a bid ever since that time with smart money rotating. We also see this trend line of altcoins versus Bitcoin. And so you can see that Bitcoin has a turn and then altcoins have their own turn. And this individual says if this trend line extends into 2025 and 2026, we should see the biggest alt season of all time. While some believe altcoins will never compete with Bitcoin again, I see the potential for the biggest liquidity rotation of all time. So Bitcoin, of course, is the rising tide that raises all boats, but altcoins definitely have a run after Bitcoin does. Here you can see that Ethereum is following the same playbook as Bitcoin. These are fractals that are overlaid on top of each other. Bitcoin 2024 and Ethereum is following that same pattern. This user says, if this echo continues, Ethereum is about to rip. Fractals don't lie when liquidity returns. The setup is done. The move is next. So again, talking about that rotation. And this post I found interesting. I still believe that once we enter price discovery for ETH above $5,000, it's basically game over. The repricing will almost certainly be one of the most violent events in human history. A little bit of hyperbole there, but I do agree that once we enter price discovery mode, you're going to get a lot of money piling into this. And we've seen this happen in many other prior examples. Let's move on now to some international news. The EU is going to print 400 billion euros by the end of the year. And obviously, that's bullish for the crypto market because as you introduce more inflation through quantitative easing and printing, then theoretically, more hard assets like cryptocurrency should come out on top. Stablecoin activity in Europe is surging, and 40.6% of all transactions flow through Ethereum and Solana. The continent is already picking winners. ETH is becoming the financial backbone, and Solana the high-speed rail. Now, one big news came out this week around Japan. So we see Japan's first yen-backed stablecoin. The JPYC just launched on Ethereum. Japan's biggest banking giants and Mizuho are gearing up to issue their own yen-pegged stablecoin. This is obviously bullish for Ethereum. We see this user saying that reading between the lines, the $4.7 trillion stablecoin estimate by 2030 only counts USD stablecoins. Other nations are catching up fast, with Japan having now just joined the race. No country can afford to fall behind on the stablecoin race. The global M2 supply is 111 trillion, with USD being 22 trillion. If every major economy issues their own stablecoins to compete, we're not talking about 4.7 trillion. We're talking about over $25 trillion in stablecoins globally by 2030. A global stablecoin arm race has begun, and it's all happening on Ethereum. And we also saw Tom Lee himself post about this Japan yen-backed stablecoin, and it's built on Ethereum, saying, anyone else notice a pattern and consistency to this news? I saw Bitcoin Archive here, a good recap around some major Bitcoin news over the past 24 hours. This is, of course, a weekly recap, so all of this happened this week. China buys 180,000 tons of U.S. soybeans, so we had some alleviation there from a geopolitics perspective. Germany's AfD party proposes strategic Bitcoin reserves. Canada cut interest rates this week. Federal Reserve cut interest rates. Fed says it will stop shrinking the balance sheet on December 1st, with that quantitative tightening essentially coming to an end. Powell says another cut in December is far from assured, but I think that the market is pricing in another cut right now. Bitcoin falls below 110,000 as Powell speaks. Trump and Xi ease trade tensions in South Korea, and we did get something finalized. I think it's going to be signed on Tuesday. So we'll see how the markets open on Monday, but I'm expecting futures to be green. The Kingdom of Bhutan now accepts Ethereum payments for international tourists. The UK just approved CoinShares Ethereum ETF. Another major market just opened the floodgates. Ethereum is now being financialized at the highest levels. The world is moving on chain. Let's now move on to accumulation. These are just some of the pieces of news that I bookmarked with regards to accumulation. We can see here, Crypto Rover posts Ethereum supply. Whales are buying up Ethereum. You can see a big spike here, and you can see that all the other balances of Ethereum are crossed off here, and he's just looking at the balance between 10,000 to 100,000 ETH. Of course, the black line is the price of Ethereum. We can see Polymarket now has Ethereum at a 52% chance of hitting $5,000 per ETH by the end of the year. ETH at $5,000 feels extremely cheap for end of the year. And so you can see the sentiment is definitely there. We can see institutions are coming in. So Bitwise posted this crypto adoption by institutions. You can see all the major financial institutions here, Bank of America, BlackRock, so on and so forth. And most of them have crypto trading and custody. Most of them have crypto ETFs. Most of them have tokenization, and some have crypto-enabled payments and private crypto funds as well. So you're seeing all the major financial institutions in the world starting to adopt Ethereum. You're seeing them all dip their toes in. They told you banks would never touch crypto. Now every major institution trades crypto, runs crypto funds, offers crypto payment rails, is building tokenized stacks. Institutions are building the future on chain, and retail is still arguing about bull or bear, about whether we're going to be at 4,000 or 5,000. And all of this is sort of happening beneath our noses. You're seeing massive accumulation. I talked about this last week. We're seeing supply shock. This is the exchange reserve for Ethereum, and you can see that supply is plummeting. And here you can see it even easier. 6.7 million ETH left on spot exchanges. This is what I posted last week as well. You just go to Crypto Quant and you can take a look at what's left on spot exchanges, but you'll notice this trend that everything is going down. Ethereum is going off of exchanges. And when this happens and you still have the strong demand, well, the price is obviously going to go up because the supply needs to meet that demand. Coinbase announced their third quarter earnings, and it came out that Ethereum trading accounted for 22% of the total volume and 17% of the transaction revenue for Coinbase in Q3. I found this to be really interesting. This looks at the number of transactions and the Ethereum price. And this post says that Ethereum transactions are rising while sentiment is still dead. This is the exact same setup that preceded the 2020 and 2021 mega move. And we saw from a technical perspective, those same patterns also repeating as well for both of those time periods. Smart money accumulates before the chart moves. Ethereum is quietly coiling for its next leg upwards. We see this. I post this every single week. The top stablecoin supply changes in the last 24 hours. This was posted earlier today on November 2nd. Ethereum is the number one in terms of the supply changes. And we saw this as well. The mystery whale account that has a 100% win rate keeps adding to his long positions. Ethereum sits at 152 million, Bitcoin at 118 million, and his Solana position at 106.4 million. Let's now move into the ETHZilla news. So ETHZilla is selling $40 million in Ethereum from their treasury as part of a $250 million stock repurchase plan. I posted about this earlier this week. I made a dedicated video to this. So if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you do that because I dive much more in depth on the ETHZilla news specifically. But basically, they said we're trading way too cheap and we're going to sell some Ethereum from our treasury and use the money to buy back stock. Now, this is a good move in the short term, obviously. My critique for it was it's a bad move for what it signals because as a treasury company, you're sort of going against your ethos and you're not really inspiring that much confidence in people to buy ETHZilla over any other digital asset treasury company if you're going to sell your Ethereum. It sort of breaks that perception that these companies do not sell their underlying assets. Anyways, check out that other video. It goes into more depth. Let's move on now to some of the ecosystem news that we saw. So here we see from this user, Ethereum on-chain activity hits an all-time high. The network has never been this active. You can see this chart measures the total gas used per day on Ethereum, and it's just skyrocketing. We can see stable coins are now bigger than most national FX reserves. The total value of Ethereum stablecoins sits at 183.2 billion. That would make it the 22nd largest reserve in the world. This puts Ethereum right behind the US and ahead of countries like Indonesia and Turkey. That's actually really crazy to think about. We see this post about Ethereum dominating real world asset values. Tokenization, no chain even comes close. You can see this massive ramp here in Ethereum. Ethereum leads with $12.2 billion in tokenized real-world assets, over 55% of the entire market. The total tokenized real-world asset value is now at $21.9 billion. And you can see here that Ethereum is most of that activity. Here we have Tom Lee on CNBC, and he is talking about the Ethereum activity as well. Let's give it a listen.
On the exchange, where you talked about the fact that cryptocurrencies tend to be early indicators of where stocks are directionally headed, as well as indicators of liquidity in the broader market. So given what we are seeing in Bitcoin, and as that relates to the S&P 500, and arguably what we're seeing in Ethereum, and what that says about the Russell 2000, I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sending a pretty bullish signal. Part of it is it's a counterfactual statement, but crypto had the biggest liquidation event, deleveraging event in history. You know, I mean, the number is probably multiples of what happened during FTX, and Bitcoin ends up down 3 or 4%. So I think it shows you that Bitcoin itself is proving to be a pretty good store of value, because if we had seen this happen with gold in the gold market, if there was a huge leveraging event and gold was only down a few percentage points, we'd of course consider that a real validation. And it's also true of Ethereum, because Ethereum is seeing so much activity growth. I mean, on the L1 and the L2, because of stable coins, and it's not reflected in the price. It does take time. So to me, because like what I call the fundamental activity on Ethereum is really picking up, it argues for a pretty big move into end of the year as well.
Do you think we're seeing?
So that obviously speaks to the strength of the ecosystem. Ethereum here with $370 billion in user assets, 5 times larger than any other chain you can see here. More than Solana, more than Tron, more than Arbitrum, more than Polygon or Avalanche or any of these other ones. Layer 2s plus upcoming upgrades equals faster, cheaper, stronger Ethereum here. So you can see the sum of funds deposited into the applications on chain, Ethereum is dominating there. And one thing you have to keep in mind here is that real money moves on chain, whether it's funds or real world assets, ETFs, stablecoins, it's going to be on Ethereum first. This is part of our thesis. This is why we've said that Wall Street has Ethereum as the blockchain of choice. It's also the blockchain of choice for developers. So you can see the top blockchains here by builder interest, and Ethereum is at the top here, and top blockchains by monthly open source developers. And again, Ethereum is at the top. Ethereum owns not only the pipeline for developers, but it's also the most serious option for institutions that are accumulating and that are adopting an ecosystem on chain. Plus, its L2 is led by Base. Ethereum is a top destination for new developers in 2025, attracting the largest share of new open source contributors and startup teams. The market is multi-chain and the builders ship on Bitcoin, Solana, and others, but the center of gravity remains Ethereum, where developers find the most tooling, liquidity, users, and funding. Gas fees at record lows. Average transaction cost in Ethereum just dropped to 1 cent, one of the lowest in history. Ethereum slipped below $4,000 after the Fed's rate cut, but analysts warn it could be a bear trap. You see the transactions per second here, and this is going to get a massive boost. So you see the all-time high is 3,100 transactions per second. The new upgrade, which is coming in December, will boost it to 12,000 transactions per second. And with this new December upgrade, base at 10 to 20,000 transactions per second in a few months. This is one of the best and most well-funded engineering teams in crypto, going ham to scale Ethereum. Open source code, everyone benefits. People still think Ethereum scaling is just the ETH. I don't know what ETH stands for. It's not. 24 of the best and most well-funded engineering teams in crypto are working to scale Ethereum right. Some significant progress that's going on there from an ecosystem perspective. Over 2 million Ethereum have been burned since the merge. That equates to about $7.6 billion gone forever at the time of this post, which was October 31st, just a few days ago. And the burn rate is 1.22 ETH per minute. So again, Bitcoin has a fixed supply. Ethereum does not. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute, Ethereum has a lot of inflation as a result. Well, not when you're burning over 2 million Ethereum in total, right? So as you're burning it, that controls for the supply. Standard Chartered tokenized real world assets could hit $2 trillion by 2028, with the vast majority built on Ethereum. The Ethereum network activity, look at this, the application revenue, 42.6 million. Layer 2 share is 17.56%. Stablecoin supply, 188 billion with 7.7% layer 2 share. In October, this hit an all-time high in October, and stablecoin supply will continue to climb higher. I saw this posted like 3 or 4 times by different people. Weekly stablecoin transfer volume on Ethereum is up by 1,000% from May of 2023. This is important. And the reason why is because it speaks to Ethereum's dominance in the stablecoin market. The fundamentals are getting stronger. And this has to do with the accumulation that we've been seeing. It has to do with all of this other news. It's reflecting in the network. So all of this is signal for people to pay attention to where the money is flowing, what the volume is looking like in the ecosystem itself. It's all public. You just have to pay attention and actually take a look at how the adoption is looking. And speaking of adoption, OpenBank now offers Ethereum services. IBM is exploring Ethereum payment services before year end. This is just a rumor. We see Ethereum ETF inflows of $133 million just yesterday alone, with BlackRock buying 72.5 million in Ethereum. We see Citibank, with 2.6 trillion assets under management, has officially partnered with Coinbase to expand Bitcoin and crypto payments. The banks are adopting it. Samsung enables Ethereum staking on Galaxy devices. Over 200 million people now have one-tap access to Ethereum yield. And this is actually really bullish because staking is becoming a standard phone feature. And that's something that will really democratize that access across the board. JP Morgan to launch an investment fund tokenization program in 2026 on Ethereum. Goldman Sachs now offers Ethereum's option trading. We see the highest monthly total transaction count ever for the Ethereum network in October, breaking its record 6 months in a row. So you see this chart is absolutely parabolic here. And this is for Bitcoin, but we see institutions set a record for Bitcoin buying. ETFs and public firms have already bought 975,000 Bitcoin this year, while miners have only created 136,000 Bitcoin. Supply shock across the board for Bitcoin as well. This is the demand, this green bar, and this is the supply, this gray bar. So you can see a massive disparity here over the last 2 years. This is absolutely staggering to see for Bitcoin, and it's going to be staggering for the entire ecosystem. We see Roy here posting saying Robinhood has tokenized nearly 500 stocks which trade on chain via Arbitrum. Volumes are quite low, with $38 million traded cumulatively, but it's interesting to see what has the highest volume. Nebius, which is my second largest holding, is the number one tokenized stock by volume. BMNR is number 4 here, which you can see. So we're going to keep an eye on this as this continues further, but that's really exciting. Now, let's talk about BMNR specifically. Tom Lee is telegraphing every single move. He's saying it publicly. He's talking his book, but he's also highlighting why this is important. They are buying more Ethereum every single week. And we saw they just provided a latest update for last Monday, $14.2 billion in total crypto plus moonshots, 3.31 million ETH at $4,100 per share. Let's take a look very quickly here. These are the weekly buys in Ethereum. So we can see every single week they buy more and more ETH. BMNR currently reigns as the largest ETH treasury, largest holder of Ethereum in the world, second largest digital asset treasury company in the world, behind only MicroStrategy, which is the biggest Bitcoin treasury in the world. You saw progress on the US and China talks. I covered this post on Tuesday when I talked about the ETHZilla news, so I won't really go in depth on there, only to say that BMNR is continuing their accumulation pattern. I also saw this post. Tom Lee's BMNR has reportedly bought 44,000 ETH worth approximately $168 million today on October 31st. So we're going to see when that update comes out next Monday, because that's when they update their holdings every single week. But we can see their wallets are still buying more and more Ethereum every single week. Bitmine invested year to date. This yellow area that's going up and to the right is their accumulation. Since the October 10th wipeout, they have deployed over $2 billion into Ethereum. And you can see the Ethereum stock price here, which has sort of come down since mid-September. And as you can see, it's come down. You can see massive purchases here from BMNR. That's just buying the dip. Here you have Bitmine, $12.2 billion in terms of their Ethereum holdings. And you can see their wallets have been buying as early as 2 days ago. So here it's very easy to see when Bitmine is buying in real time. This is also Bitmine Rocks here, where you can also see some of the same information. Bitmine is over 50% of their goal to own 6 million Ethereum, or 5% of the total supply, after which point the idea is that they're going to stake that supply. They also released some investor relations documents here. So, I mean, we had this presentation from Token 2049 Singapore, but they also released this deck here earlier this week around Ethereum, saying stablecoins are having their ChatGPT moment. 53% of the total stablecoin value is issued on Ethereum, more than double the nearest chain, which is Tron. You can see some macro news, which we're going to jump to in just a second. Tokenization is massive. I've shared this exact screenshot before. Robinhood CEO saying tokenization is a freight train. We've shared that exact clip before. AI and crypto. A lot of the stuff we already know, but this is all public. You can go on Bitmine's investor relation page and you can take a look at this whole presentation. I also highly recommend you take a look at the chairman's message tab here with Tom Lee's keynote, because this is one of the best explanations of Bitmine that you're ever going to see. Now, let's move on to the final category, macro, because this video, again, is way too long. Breaking, U.S. senators are racing to wrap up the crypto bill before Thanksgiving. Coinbase's CEO believes there's a real shot it gets passed before 2025 is over. Here we have the SEC chair, Paul Atkins, saying Ethereum is not a security. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, well, so similar to Bitcoin, I mean, the SEC has stated informally more than formally that Ether is not a security, and so, but obviously the ETH blockchain is very key component for a lot of other digital currencies. So it's up to companies to decide where they want to put their money and what sort of strategy they have. Obviously, not for me to tell them, but I think it's encouraging that these sorts of digital assets are being embraced by the marketplace, and I think that provides a good future for development and further innovation in this sector.
So that's very bullish news, but it's also extra bullish when you consider the source of where it's coming from. That's SEC Chair Paul Atkins saying ETH is not a security and that there's adoption across the board. And I want to also talk about this. So this is an article that came out saying the Treasury to exempt Bitcoin from 15% tax on unrealized gains saving strategy billions. But I think they're also going to include here in the corporate alternative minimum tax Ethereum as well. And they're introducing an exclusion option allowing corporations to disregard fair value measurement adjustments for items such as digital assets that are marked to market for financial statements, but not for regular tax purposes. The guide also provides a hedge coordination option for certain hedging transactions where both the hedge and hedged item are marked to market for tax, but not financial statement purposes. The corporate alternative minimum tax applies to corporations earning over $1 billion annually based on adjusted financial statement income, which includes fair value adjustments of assets such as Bitcoin, even when unsold. Here's another article here. Now, this is from October 2nd, so it didn't necessarily happen this week, but it's just providing some more context here on some of the macro pieces that we were talking about. U.S. Treasury exempts Ethereum from 15% corporate tax. And this is essentially what I was reading in that previous article. Ethereum adoption is set to accelerate as companies can now legally and efficiently manage large holdings without fearing heavy taxation. It further solidifies ETH's role as a key asset in corporate and institutional portfolios. Now, you have some big macro news coming this week. We have the US-China deal, which is signing on Tuesday. You have employment data. You have a whole bunch of other news. Okay, let me wrap up there. There was a lot of news, so I hope I wasn't going too fast for you. I was just trying to cover everything. Like I said, there was about 100 tabs that I bookmarked for just news this week around the Ethereum ecosystem, around adoption, around the technical patterns, the accumulation, around the ETHZilla news, international adoption, the rotation from Bitcoin and gold into Ethereum, and obviously BMNR specific news. BMNR remains one of my top 5 holdings. It's something that I cannot help but add more into. And this is exactly the reason why, is because once I see these news and I understand what's going on from behind the scenes, I think to myself, obviously, I want to be following the money. I want to be following the flow of volume that is going into this ecosystem, because while everybody else on the retail investment side on X is arguing about whether it's going to go to 4,300 or 3,800, you have massive, massive adoption from not only the world's biggest institutions, but also the #1 preferred platform for developers and others from nation states entirely. Stablecoins is going to be huge. Tokenization is going to be huge. And I think it's only going to go in one direction from here. There's going to be volatility, but ultimately we go higher, is my own opinion. None of this is financial advice. Please do your own homework. Don't follow me into any of these trades. I'm just a guy on the internet sharing my opinions. However, if you do like those opinions and you do like this video, please share this out with somebody who you think might also enjoy it. Like the video, subscribe, consider becoming a member to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for the next BMNR Weekly Recap.